Mahbobi is a spokesperson for campaign to free political prisoner in Iran, former political prisoner and women rights activist. Shiva Mahbobi is an Iranian former political prisoner. Prior to her arrest, she was active in the student movement in Iran against the Islamic regime of Iran. She was arrested when she was 16 and spent more than 3 years in prison. Shiva left Iran for Turkey in 1992. She was refugee rights and women rights campaigner in Turkey. She went to Canada and lived in Toronto, where she was the coordinator of the Action Committee in Defense of Women's Rights in Iran, Canada. She has campaigned for women's rights, abolition of stoning and death penalty, refugee rights, and release of political prisoners all her life. She also works as a psychotherapist, and right now she is now living in UK, and she is currently the spokesperson for the campaign to free political prisoners in Iran. Please.
Hello everyone. I'm very glad to be here. It's really inspiring to hear that how much people talk about the political prisoners. It's inspiring that actually people from Iran, if they know that they're going to be arrested again, they still send a message to this conference. And I know Neil said that it should be a Palestinian person coming and talking, and I think you're right, but at the same time, it's really inspiring that someone who is not from Palestine speak about freedom of expression and defending them. And I think people like yourself reinforce that international solidarity with the political prisoner. So I'm really honored to be among all of you. And I will briefly, I know you're tired, it's been a long day, but briefly try to speak about the right activists in Iran. And when I say right activists, I mean all aspects of rights in terms of women's rights, labor rights, political activists. So just to keep it short, I'll just call them right activists. Just the situation they are under, and also the situation of some prisons, and forms of torturing people that is not defined necessarily, and some of the examples of these prisoners, which you see all of them, some of them on this slideshow. It was 40 years ago when people in Iran stood against torture and imprisonment and suppression of Shah. Shortly after that, the Islamic regime came and hijacked our revolution. And since then, there has been arrest, imprisonment, suppression every single day. And I remember at the time when the revolution started, shortly after that, the Evin prison, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the nickname is torture factory actually. So Evin prison was open to the public, and at the time in 1970, I was around 10 or 11 years old. I went with my family and we queued up to see Evin. People wanted to see where they tortured their loved one. We actually never got a chance to get in because the queue was so long. But I was just reflecting back, when I was 11 years old, waiting to go to see Evin prison, I would never imagine one day I'll end up being a prisoner there. I would never imagine that I have to stand up for my very basic right as a human being, and especially as a woman under the Islamic regime. And I think this is not just my story. This is the story of people in my generation. We in that generation, I would like to call ourselves children of revolution. Some people call us birth generation. And I would like to say we learned from the when we were a kid, actually we have to fight with our right, otherwise we won't survive. So I guess when you think about it, and I know that it's not just Evin prison, there are plenty of other prisons that I would name it. But I would like to, you see those pictures, we talk about the situation of political prisoners, and I don't think it's very different in Turkey, Palestine, Morocco, Egypt, or any other country. It's very similar. But I think I would like you to, for now, step back before we talk about political prisoners. And just imagine what it's like to be a right activist in Iran. What pressure you are under. It's not just we end up in prison. We were in a bigger prison before that. So I know some of you have been among those prisoners and activists in Iran, including myself, but I would like to imagine when you're coming back from work, from school, and you're tired, you're going home to rest, you're getting close to your house, and all of a sudden you see the door is half open. You hear the crying from your family. You see everything is upside down inside the house. Members of the family, including your young children, are crying, saying that the security forces, they raided the house, they took everything, including your computer, your personal stuff, and they're gonna come back and arrest you. It's horrible, isn't it? And then at that point, these activists think about, what do I do? Do I go to hiding, or do I stay around to get arrested? Unfortunately, many activists have to stay around because the problem is many of them are breadwinners. Many of them know if they go to hiding, what happened? They will arrest a member of the family. So they stay around. So these right activists, not just right activists, to be honest, everyone who opposes the regime, every single day their phone being monitored, they've been threatened every single day. They get expelled from work, from university. You're monitored all the time. So, I mean, but if you look at that, all this happened because that person demands to have a life worthy of a human being, demands to have the unpaid wages, demands to have, the right to wear what I want to wear, the right to travel, all these very, very basic things that we don't even think about it in these countries. For that reason, they are under massive pressure. And so, basically, when they arrest them, they send them to prisons, and most of the time, in the beginning, family do not know what happened to them. They are under intense interrogation, long hours of interrogation, solitary confinement, physically and psychologically being tortured, including rape, including being deprived of medical attention. But I think the best way to see what's happening with these prisoners is the testimonies from prison. And I'm really sorry if this comes a bit disturbing to you, but I think we have to talk about it. Gladly I speak English, and hopefully that young guy don't understand what I'm saying. So, so one of the prisoners that in 2009, if you remember the uprising, do you remember there was lots of demonstrations? At the time, they opened a prison, which was a kind of an infamous prison, Kahrizak, which is known as death camp, and they put lots of people there. One of the witnesses saying, raping and sexually assaulting prisoners, taking their clothes off, pouring water on them, and lashing them while their body is wet, so the prisoners feel more pain. On the hot days of summer, guards would force prisoners to crawl on the ground on hot asphalt, and then they walked on prisoners' hands and feet while they were crawling, and they broke the bones in their hands and feet. And another eyewitness in 2009 saying, I saw a person who had all but his two upper teeth knocked out, his nail had been pulled out, his head had been bashed, and I knew that his kidney had stopped functioning. But what most disturbed me were the sign of rape on the body, stitches around very sensitive part of his body. He had been brutally raped, and this was very, very common in 2009. Another prisoner, Zainab Jalalian, which I'm sure you see the picture there, she is 37 years old, political activist who is in prison and now losing her eyesight, doesn't get any treatment. In a letter she said about the torture, she said, they tore my clothes, blindfolded me, chained my arms and legs to the bed, and terribly tortured me. My feet were terribly swollen as a result of being flogged with cables. They tortured me so much that I felt numb. I lost control of my bodily function. and I wetted my pants. And one form of torture that they do, beside the very known one, is, I'm sure in other prisoners as well, is depriving prisoners from medical attention. One, and second, they put political prisoners in prisons that they are contagious diseases, and they just leave them there. The reason is because regime wanted to get rid of them, but they don't execute them, because if they execute them, they're going to face international campaign. So it's better to just get rid of them in this way, and they just say that this is because of the natural causes. And there are many of them. Because of the time, I won't mention it, but I will just mention one very heartbreaking story, that when one of political prisoners got released, we interviewed him, and he talked about another prisoners, but even among Iranian people, I don't know, you know, his name a lot. This prisoner saying what he saw. He said, I knew of a prisoner at the section I was in, whose name was Dariush Arjomand. He was kept in solitary confinement for 2.5 years. He had AIDS, and the prison clinic stopped providing him with antibiotic pills, so he would die soon. They did not even give him the minimum medicine necessary for AIDS patient. Prison guards were afraid to open his cell to send him to the bathroom or shower. The light in his cell was out for a while, but no one went in to change the bulb. So this is one example of it, among thousands of them. Another example, what they do, they transfer the political prisoners to the prisons that they keep prisoners who were arrested for the offenses such as murder and drug, etc. And what happened, the prison authority usually set up a fight, and they make them attack the political prisoners. And one of them that my colleague Parisa mentioned, that just happened last week. A young boy, 21 years old, Ali Reza Shir Muhammad Ali, was arrested in 2018 and was sentenced to 8 years. He also managed a Facebook called Atheism. So, and then he was stabbed by 2 other inmates in the prison, in the notorious prison called Greater Tehran prison, called as Fashal Fouye, which is a really known one. And Sohail Arabi, you saw the mom who giving messages, Sohail Arabi, the blogger. He is actually being kept in the same prison, so any minute same thing might happen to him as well. And another form of, let's say, physically getting rid of the prisoners, because they can never get rid of that spirit of fighting, is by torturing them, killing them under torture, and then they said that they committed suicide. One of the very well-known cases that you might know, it's an environmentalist activist, Kavus Said Emami, who in February 2018 was killed in custody, and then the family was told that he committed suicide, which is a nonsense. They did it for 6 other people in the uprising, but nothing like that is possible. It's just another way of killing them. There are lots of, I know I have a limited time, so I'm trying to speak quickly. I know there are lots of prisoners that we can talk about them for hours and hours, including those that you see. But at the end of the day, I would like to just present 2 of them only to you. So I would like you to just keep them in mind as an organization, see what you can about them, and I think it's important to see who they are. One of them, that you see the picture as well, one just been recently arrested, one been in prison for 25 years. This one is Nahid Shaghawi. Nahid Shaghawi is a women's rights activist. She has been very, very outspoken. You know how difficult it is to be a women's rights activist in Iran? Being a woman is a crime in itself under the Islamic rules. So Nahid Shaghawi is in prison, was arrested in May. No one knows what is going to happen to her. Actually, she is in danger of losing her life any minutes, because no one knows what's happening. Another one that I wanted to show you is Mohammad Nazari. Mohammad Nazari was arrested, I think, when he was 23. He has been in prison. He was a political activist. He has been in prison for 25 years. He should have been released based on the regime's policy 4 or 5 years ago. His demand to go to have a review on his file and be released never been answered. He went on hunger strike. He is deprived of medical attention. He lost most of his member of family. Like, he doesn't have anyone to speak up, to come and give us a message here, to say, my child is in prison. So I think it is our duty. These are not just the boys and girls of their own family. It's actually our family as well. I'm not just talking about Iran. I think no political prisoners should exist in the world. But at the end, what I would like to say, I know, as Neil said, we can talk for hours about this, and it's necessary, but of course it's important to talk about the torture. So I would draw your attention to the brutal torture, to the torture and imprisonment of these people, to people who've been killed just literally because they want to speak their mind, that's all. I would draw your attention to all this. Please do not forget, because it's dangerous to forget what happened to these people. But at the same time, I would like to invite you, with your heart and in your mind, to just see beyond that torture. Because what the torture does, why the dictatorship and fascist regime do that, it's not just torturing one person. They want to instill fear in the society. That's what they want to do. They want us to remember the torture, not the fight. And so for that reason, I invite you to just see beyond that. See the person beyond that torture. See the fighter. See the person who is still standing up for their rights and is so brave. We saw some of them here, but at the same time, through their letters, when they send out. I will just mention 2 of them. Zainab Jalanian, the same woman who is in prison, in one of her letters says to the oppressors, you should know by now that women could not oppress by way of massacre, torture, and imprisonment. A woman is born free. No oppression can force her to give up her right. Sohail Arabi, another one that you're familiar with, in his letter said, he is the voice of a generation that is not scared of prison and fight for freedom. And this is what I want you to leave you with, not the torture. This. If we remember this, then we keep on fighting. If we remember this, when I was in prison, I would never imagine one day I'll be here talking to you. But what kept me alive, that my cause is right. I have to fight for freedom. So I want you to remember the spirit of these people, that they are in prison and not giving up. So we shouldn't give up. And I think all together, no matter which country we're from or fighting for, which political prisoner, we should get together and be the voice of all these prisoners. Thank you.